Lieutenant Hardwell straightened himself up, using all the might he could muster from his knees. They were getting worse in his recent years, so he had to do it slowly. His adjutant, Sergeant Liam, was still racking one out next to him. It was almost time for them to switch. They were taking turns on watch duty, and it was real easy to let the sounds of distant gunfire lull them back to sleep. The muffled bursts of gunfire and the cacophony of explosions had that effect on a plastic soldier, once they got a taste for the grit when they got their boots on the ground, finally. The murky swamps in Sector F4 in western Greyland also had an effect towards calming their steady nerves, drifting their minds slowly off to sleep to embrace the gentle dreams of where they would rather be, instead of the morning light that reality brought which repelled them. They were waiting for further orders from HQ regarding their post. The battle was going on several kilometers away. While Hardwell and his men were away from the action, doing the occasional reconnaissance, and making sure no one tried to cross their lines. The boys back at camp nearby were doing their part, and pretty soon they were going to be rotated again so someone else could take their watch. Their orders were simple. These fresh batch of newly molded plastic troops were fresh off from boot camp and were ready for field deployment. While they had skill to be sure, this mission was to serve as an experience run for them to gain with little to no losses. Hardwell liked that. It was better that they got proper guidance than just book smarts alone. As he got up, he nudged Liam awake. The young man startled himself, then got up to his feet twice as fast as Hardwell did, and gave a crisp salute, to which he returned the respectful gesture. Good, he thought. These boys are going to make fine soldiers. Lieutenant, sir! The boy shouted. At ease, he replied. You know what to do? Yes, sir. I'm ordered to keep on guard and watch for any patrols. And? Hardwell prodded. The boy was silent for a moment. He knew he was being tested. And I am to report for any of those patrols and do not fire until fired upon, he finally said. Good answer, the lieutenant replied. Hardwell knew what that kind of pressure, clear and precise communication felt as a rookie. Due to them being inexperienced and understandably nervous toward their superiors and their objective, they tend to forget to say a detail or two when it came to addressing their orders. They knew in their head what to do. Hardwell had faith in them for that. It was more of a mental thing for new soldiers, nay, people, when they were eager to please their superiors and being afraid to fail. It's just that the lieutenant knew that other officers in the Green Army didn't have that kind of patience. If anything, those same kind of officers would regard him as too soft for their liking. And then there were the seasoned veterans, who would welcome anyone like him. The kind of veterans who lived beyond 1,000 years of service instead of being blown to bits or melted by enemy flamethrowers. He watched the young man trudge along the swamp a dozen meters forward. Using his dark green contours to match his surroundings, he hid behind a rock and quietly readied his rifle. His silencing suppressor fit on tight. Hardwell then found his new hiding spot a few moments later, and then set himself down again, just as slowly as before, and began to do what any other soldier would do to calm their nerves, or just doing it out of sheer boredom. He started to check his M16 rifle and began to disassemble it. He felt the smooth, hard plastic as he had put it back together again in less than a minute. It was standard training for all Green soldiers to make sure their equipment was working fine and were well loaded. The relaxing snaps and clicking of plastic components made for an excellent accompaniment to the music that the war was making in the background, along with the sounds the swamp's flora and fauna made as well. Timing was always important in this routine check. In the event for an ambush, or any other form of attack, he needed to be armed and ready ASAP. Upon his final reassembly, he heard his adjutant's footsteps, the quick yet silent patterned mix of sloppy, sucking noises his boots made on the mud, and the crunchy grit of dirt indicated his swift advance. Sir, we've got a blue spy. A standard trooper by the looks of him. A blue spy? Here? They were informed about this. This was some sort of hitch in the plan. When encountering a blue spy, Green troops of their caliber and size required them to take the following actions. 1. If they could capture a blue spy, that would be the top priority unless it conflicts with the main objective. Spies carried vital information, especially if it's away from the diverting battlefield. 2. If they attempt to apprehend the spy, they must do it quickly, efficiently, and in some cases without detection or alerting any opposition. There are plenty of other protocols for encounters with the Blues, but these fit the bill for their situation perfectly. That, and the confidence of their success validated Hardwell's feelings for his men to get some much-needed experience. Alright, show me where he went, but first I have to inform the boys back at camp. The lieutenant pulled out his silent radio and informed the men back at camp what the hitch was. They were to be close by, provide covering fire or fire assist if the lone Blue had any friends waiting for ambush. Of course, that would imply that the Blue knew that there were going to be Greens out here, but if that were the case, then they would have ratted out on them by now and let the Tans and Greys take care of them. It was always whoever benefited the Blues the most when it came to their buddies giving them a helping hand. But something wasn't adding up, so Hardwell made the executive decision. The two green soldiers made their way back to the rock they were just at. Leah pointed in the distance, and handed the lieutenant his pair of binocs. After a brief adjustment period and zooming in, Hardwell could see the figure of a plastic man with some irregular kind of pistol pushing his way past the brush and disappearing into the forest canopy in front of them several meters away. His uniform wasn't anything he'd ever seen, and his helmet had some weird antennae jutting out from the top. It must have been some kind of experimental espionage technology. If that were the case, then their orders were to recover this technology and get it back to HQ for research, and hopefully make some of their own. Lieutenant Hardwell turned around to see the rest of his squad a few meters behind him. He made a stopping motion with his hand, a zipping motion over his mouth, a finger between his lips, pointing to himself and Leah, followed by a series of footsteps with his fingers, then ending his instructions by pointing to the group and making a circular motion with said finger by pointing with his other hand to the small canopy, and motioning his hand flat as a way to say, "Stay low." He got a thumbs up from the rest of the team in acknowledgement. With that reassurance that they were improving in hand communication, he led his adjutant to the location of where the blue spy was last seen. They silently made their way across the swamp, using their green colors to blend with their murky, gray, greenish surroundings like they had been trained to do, occasionally moving in rhythm with the gunfire or explosions in the distance in an effort to mask their sounds of movement in any way that they could. Finally reaching their destination, they pushed past the trees and twigs, followed the footprints left behind by the Blue. No Blue soldier was this sloppy, so this definitely indicated that this guy was setting them up for an ambush. Hardwell had already sprung the trap, it seemed, so there was no point in turning back now. That, and his men were already in position carrying out his orders. No, it wasn't perfect. It was a pretty thin plan, but from his personal experience, things like this tend to happen in a nearby war zone. The best he could do was hope his men could get them out safely if there was a firefight. When the footprints stopped, they noticed that the air around them had seemed to change as they got closer to the end of the forest canopy. They felt the pungent smell of ozone, and they also heard someone talking a few meters ahead past the canopy of trees. As they crept closer, they also noticed there was a shimmering light emanating from what was a several feet drop down a muddy slope. That light didn't seem to have increased, but it did shimmer slightly, yet also erratically. The light had an incandescent glow of blue and turquoise, which reminded Hardwell of the ocean, lakes, and other bodies of water. However, the light quickly snuffed itself out, and he might have heard a silent shriek of electricity. When the two soldiers got to the peak of the slope across from where they were, they saw something they couldn't easily describe at first if you asked them. A massive construct, made of hardened plastic stone, chipped away and overall looking something akin to an ancient relic. A platform with a half-finished ring at the top, flanked by two pointed ends jutting from both sides. The entire thing had a large base with steps so numerous that it would take them a good minute to climb it. The funny thing was, this architectural masterpiece wasn't here before they arrived in the swamp. The recon boys and the air cavalry would have made note of that structure before in that briefing room they were in, before they were ever even transported to this area in the first place. At the bottom of the structure was the blue spy they were after. This time, he didn't seem to be at all oblivious that he was being watched. The dead giveaway being was he was looking right up at them, motioning them to come down, despite the fact that they were both hiding behind massive tree trunks. Hardwell didn't like it. He wasn't entirely sure what this was or who this man is, but for some reason he was overtaken by his natural instinct and curiosity of what laid before him. Somehow, his military training and years of experience became completely subservient to his instincts, surprising even himself at how easy it was to ignore being sensible as he slid down the hill to meet the man. Lieb was quick to follow. Hardwell made a mental note to tell him not to do what he just did later on. He also promised himself to set a better example for the rest of his men that were watching, if they're even here to begin with, when it came to looking before you leap. Hardwell leveled his rifle at the blue plastic man and said, "Identify yourself. Name, rank, and affiliation before being apprehended for questioning." The man smiled softly, placing his geeky-looking pistol to the ground, and held up both of his hands in the air. He replied in an accent that sounded formal, yet felt as if it was weighted down by long years of experience that made Hardwell feel like he could relate to the man. "My name is Captain Elroy. Prime Fleet. K. Anderson Group. Intel Division," the calm voice of reason said. Intelligence. Good. Then he was a blue spy. Or at least, he would have been, if he hadn't sent everything he had before that last part. Hardwell hadn't heard of this Prime Fleet or Anderson Division. To his knowledge, the Blues didn't really have a fleet of any kind. "Forgive me, soldier, but right now I'm having a hard time understanding what you mean. Where is the rest of your company? Are you with the Timberwolf Company? Where's your squad?" The captain shook his head. "I'm actually not from around here, friend. Took a wrong turn somewhere. Luckily, I found a convenient ticket back home right here. Well, more like an avenue to get off this plastic blot." The way he said plastic blot was not too dissimilar to addressing the entire world of Plastica like any soldier would, especially if they're referring to the world being a bad place whenever they were in the dumps. And by his deductive reasoning, Hardwell assumed that the blue man meant was he was not from this world, implying that he was a spaceman of sorts. Controlling his breath to regulate his nerves, Hardwell made a quick jabbing gesture with his rifle toward the architecture. "You mean this thing? I know it wasn't here before. Who are you? Where are you from?" The blue traveler was silent for a moment, looked up at the ringed top the structure had, the half-finished ring top, and then back to Hardwell. He opened his mouth to speak, but then the ring started to crackle forks of electricity. The smell of ozone picked up in the air rapidly. Hardwell felt the air shimmer around them, and felt a vibrational hum that didn't help his stomach at all with the kind of rations he had in there. "I was just talking to my superiors on the holocom. While I got lost here on this planet initially, I was also ordered to quietly explore this place. Find out if you guys were ready yet." The sound of explosions and muffled rifle fire cut him off a moment before he could continue his sentence. "Maybe another century or two, I guess." "Ready for what?" Hardwell had asked.